Well, is this the end? Is the superhero movie era finally over? Many people are suggesting Superman and the Fantastic Four, both great movies, have brought in the end of this era because superhero fatigue seems to be very real. So, what are we going to do? Well, let's take a couple minutes to talk about this as a larger issue, what needs to happen, and why I still think the future for our favorite comic book characters are pretty bright. Well, ever since we all had to go home, shut the doors, put on our masks, and stop going to the movies when the worldwide health crisis struck, quite honestly, the box office has never been the same. Now, that's not to say we haven't had some billion-dollar movies. Both Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool 3 both broke that billion-dollar mark in the superhero genre. We've had a couple other flirt with it, including Guardians of the Galaxy and the Doctor Strange sequel. But after this year's 2 summer tentpoles really not doing as well as people hoped, I think there's a discussion that needs to be had. This past weekend, the Fantastic Four reached $434 million in the worldwide box office, and that was about $230 domestically and $203 worldwide. Now, Superman has managed to reach $578 million worldwide, with most interestingly $331 domestically, the best of any movie this year, and only $247 internationally, where the movie seems to be not as much of a draw. Now, where both these movies eventually land, I think that's the big question. And it seems like to me the Fantastic Four is ultimately going to be about $500 million, and Superman is definitely going to break $600, maybe get to $620 or $630. So, are these movies successes or not? Now, typically, I'm a numbers person, and they both do draw some concern, and we should pay attention here, but they both kind of have different goals. Now, superhero fatigue, I think, has happened in the sense that fans were force-fed too much content, and now there's a level of just disinterest. They've had enough, they're not hungry for it. Quite honestly, Marvel hasn't slowed down the train this year, and that's probably not helping it with 3 theatrical releases. But that's about the change, I think. Now, DC, on the other hand, had a huge break, and they're laying the framework for a new universe here. So, like I said, different goals for different projects. Now, typically what we like to point to for what's profitable is whether the movie crosses some box office thresholds. Now, typically the equation people use is the studio gets about half of what the box office produces. These numbers vary based on the region. Domestically, they tend to do better. Internationally, there's more layers of distribution, so a bigger cut goes to other parties. So we're often kind of left in the dark on exactly where these lines of success or failure live. Now, the Fantastic Four was reported to have about a $200 million budget, and Superman about $250. But none of these numbers have actually been totally confirmed. And that would definitely put both of these movies in a tight spot because they also had marketing campaigns that cost a significant amount of money, especially Superman. One thing to consider in all of this, though, is yes, they typically do the 50% box office split in North America, but there's often deals negotiated with the theaters on the opening weekend. Many times, these numbers are skewed on the opening weekend towards the studios, sometimes as high as 75 or 80%, because theaters, quite honestly, make most of their money on concessions, and they just want butts in seats. The more people they have in the theater, the more popcorn they sell, the more money they make. So those first weekends tend to be more important to the studio. Also add in the fact that Superman specifically did so much better domestically, that threshold for profitability is a bit lower even though Superman costs a bit more. The Fantastic Four hasn't finished its run yet, but I also think that is going to be a movie that probably ekes out of the red ink but doesn't make any serious profit. Now, Superman had different goals. They're trying to establish a new universe and some excitement, and I think they did that pretty well. Where the Fantastic Four was trying to do some different things, and although I don't think the movie was a failure, definitely think it had more baggage to overcome than the Superman project. Plus, it didn't have James Gunn's reputation tied to it, and honestly, with moviegoers, his reputation is pretty stellar. So what are they going to do in the future here to kind of solve some of these problems? Math is pretty easy, guys. You gotta lower the cost of the films. Both of these films were $200 million or more, and if either movie had reduced their budgets by about 25%, they would be clearly into the profitability zone. I think you're already seeing this with some studios like at Marvel. Recently, Marvel said when they bring the X-Men to life, casting all young actors and relatively unknowns. Robert Downey Jr. is getting $100 million to be in 2 Avengers movies, $50 million apiece, right? That is a massive increase for the budget for that one actor. Layer on Chris Hemsworth, possibly Chris Evans, Tom Hiddleston, and other big-name Marvel actors, well, all of a sudden you got a case where your budget for talent is pretty steep. Inversely, Superman did not grab really that many household names. Nicholas Holt's a pretty big name, and he was the highest paid actor on that crew at $2 million. So think about the different budgetary implications. I think moving forward, you're going to see these movies simply reduce the budget and probably reduce some of the promotional costs associated with the films, therefore lowering the line to get into profitability. I don't think the era of superhero movies is over, but I do think both the Fantastic Four and Superman have changed the game, maybe for the better. Quite honestly, some of the best movies ever made had a lower budget. It forces you to focus on story and not spectacle. And although a great spectacle is great, well, like George Lucas used to say, it's just a special effect on a screen. It's not a story. Stories matter. And this is something over time, I think particularly at Marvel Studios with a whole series of billion-dollar wins a couple years back, well, they kind of inched away from that. That showed in their work, and now they're trying to reel that back in. Obviously, we're watching this situation with our favorite films very closely, and I think next year is going to be the telltale with Spider-Man No Way Home, Supergirl, and Avengers Doomsday. If Supergirl does better than Superman, it's a great sign. It means the DC side of the house is recovering from damage in the past, building some momentum. And with Spider-Man Brand New Day following up a billion-dollar movie, well, expectations are high for that, and obviously Marvel's looking for the big win with Avengers Doomsday. So I think by the end of next year, we'll know the exact health status of the superhero movie genre, and that could definitely impact the future, but it doesn't mean it's going to go away. It just means they're going to have to do it different. Until we know more, we're going to have to wait and see. Before we take off, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC news, and we want to bring you all the news truthfully and transparently, so you're really in the know.